The key went in, yet the lock refused to turn. I stood alone on the front porch of my house in Sudbury, Ontario. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October, my suitcase resting beside me, the familiar scent of wood smoke drifting through the air, the way it always does up here when the seasons shift. I had been away for 11 days, a fishing excursion near Chapleau with my longtime friend Gerald, something we had done every autumn for nearly 20 years. I tried the key once more. Still nothing. I stepped back and studied the door. The same door I had installed back in 1987. The same brass handle I had swapped out the summer after my wife Patricia passed away 3 years ago. I pulled out my phone and dialed my son. He answered on the second ring. "Dad," he said, "you're home early." "I'm standing on my porch, Ryan. My key doesn't work." There was a brief pause. Not too long, but enough. "Dad, we need to talk. Are you okay to drive? Can you come over to our place?" "I'm not going anywhere. Whose lock is on my door?" Another pause. Then I heard my daughter-in-law's voice in the background, quiet and tense. Ryan replied, "Dad, just stay right there. We'll come to you." They showed up 22 minutes later. I know because I sat on the porch steps and kept an eye on the clock on my phone. I didn't call a locksmith. I didn't call the police. I simply sat there in the chill with my hands clasped in my lap, breathing steadily and waiting, because I already understood. I had known for 6 weeks. I had been preparing for this very moment. What surprised me was how steady I felt inside. My name is Walter Kowalski. I am 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a structural engineer with the same company in Sudbury. I retired at 62 and have lived in this same house on Martindale Road for 38 years. It is not a grand home. It is a 4-bedroom brick house on a corner lot with a double garage and a workshop out back, where I spend most of my time making furniture, tables, chairs, bookshelves, nothing elaborate, just sturdy pieces built to endure. Patricia and I purchased the house in 1986 for $94,000. When she passed 3 years ago, I had it valued. The appraisal came back at just over $720,000. That caught me off guard. It shouldn't have. That's simply how houses appreciate in Ontario. But it was the first time I saw my home as a figure rather than a place I lived in, and I didn't care for that feeling. I have one son. Ryan is 41 and lives about 15 minutes away with his wife Diane and their 2 children. For most of his life, Ryan was a decent son. Not especially close, but he called on birthdays, came by at Christmas, and once helped me move some lumber. After Patricia died and I threw out my back, he began visiting more often. I thought it was out of grief. I thought he was looking after me. Looking back now, I believe he was evaluating. It began modestly, the way these matters often do. "Dad, are you eating well? You've lost some weight. Dad, when was your last doctor visit? You should get checked. Dad, the driveway is getting rough. Let me take care of that." At first, I didn't think much of it. I was actually grateful. It felt like genuine care. It felt like my son stepping forward. But gradually, the tone changed. The questions grew sharper. The concern began to sound like something different. "Dad, this house is a lot for one person. 4 bedrooms, all these stairs. Have you considered if it still fits your needs?" "Dad, Diane's mother moved into a nice place in Barrie last year, and she really enjoys it. Her own unit, meals provided, activities every day. You might like it too." "Dad, I'm just saying you could pull the equity from this house and live comfortably for the rest of your days without dealing with upkeep, taxes, or the furnace breaking down." I told him I wasn't interested. I explained that this was the house where I had raised him, where his mother had tended her garden, and where I had my workshop. I reminded him I was 65 at the time and perfectly able to handle my own life. He nodded. He let it drop. Then, about 2 months later, he brought it up again. The pattern repeated 4 or 5 times over the next year. Each time I refused. Each time he waited a while and returned with a slightly new approach. Once he brought Diane along, which I now realize was strategic. She is warmer than Ryan, easier to speak with, and I have always liked her. Once he arrived with brochures from 3 different retirement residences. Once he spoke about what might happen if I fell in the workshop and no one found me for days. That remark hit harder than he expected, because 2 weeks earlier, I actually had fallen in the workshop. I was lifting a heavy piece of hardwood from the top shelf, misjudged the weight, and landed hard on my left side. Nothing was broken, just bruised ribs and pride, but I lay on the concrete floor for about 20 minutes before I could stand. I never told anyone. I didn't call for help. I lay there thinking about Patricia, then about what I needed to do, and then I got up. When Ryan mentioned falling in the workshop, I wondered, how does he know? Of course he didn't. It was a general worry, not a specific one. Still, the coincidence unsettled me, and I began noticing details I had only half registered before. Like the time Ryan casually asked to be added to my bank account for emergencies. I had agreed without much hesitation because he had helped with some online transfers after Patricia died, and it seemed sensible. Like the time Diane casually inquired where I kept my important papers, my will, the property deed, insurance documents. I had shown her the filing cabinet in the spare bedroom. I had even given her a house key a year earlier so she could water the plants while I was away. Like the fact that Ryan had twice mentioned knowing a real estate agent who specialized in estate transitions and had assisted many families in similar circumstances. None of these things seemed alarming individually. Taken together, however, they painted a very clear picture. The moment that finally made everything click happened on a Thursday evening in late August. I was sitting at my kitchen table sorting through the day's mail, the old-fashioned paper kind, since I have never fully trusted electronic billing. Among the envelopes was one from a law firm in Toronto I had never heard of. Inside was a single sheet summarizing a power of attorney document. My name was listed, and Ryan's name appeared as the appointed attorney. The effective date was 2 weeks earlier. I had never signed any power of attorney. I sat at that table for a long while. I read the page 4 times. I flipped it over as if an explanation might be on the reverse. There was none. I stood up, brewed a pot of tea, sat down again, and read it once more. Then I phoned my own lawyer. Her name is Beverly Tanaka. She has been my lawyer for 20 years. She handled Patricia's estate, prepared my will, and managed a property disagreement with a neighbor back in 2011. She is intelligent and straightforward, and she doesn't waste words. I called her at home, something I had never done before, and she answered because she recognized my number. I read her the letter. She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Walter, don't touch anything in the house. Leave those documents where they are, and don't speak to Ryan yet. Come see me first thing tomorrow morning." I barely slept that night. I lay awake in the dark in the bed I had shared with Patricia for 35 years, staring at the ceiling and thinking about my son. I thought about the boy I had coached in hockey, the teenager I had driven to university in London, the young man I had danced with at his wedding. I thought about what it means to love someone and then be betrayed by them. I wondered if I was mistaken, if there might be some explanation. By morning, I had concluded there wasn't. Beverly confirmed what I had already guessed. The power of attorney had been filed using forged papers. She suspected the real estate lawyer had used a copied signature from some old document I had signed years earlier. She told me this kind of thing happened more often than most people realized, especially with older homeowners, and particularly after losing a spouse, when one person becomes the sole owner of a valuable property. She also shared something that made my stomach sink. A conditional purchase and sale agreement had been registered on my house 3 weeks earlier. The closing date was set for mid-November. The sale price was $695,000, roughly $25,000 under market value, which Beverly said was common in these situations. Quick sale, willing buyer, everyone looking elsewhere. My son had sold my house while I was still living in it. Beverly outlined my choices. I could contact the police right away. I could confront Ryan. I could file an injunction to stop the sale. All those options existed. But she also advised, Walter, if you act too quickly, Ryan and his lawyer will claim the POA is valid and drag this out for a year. Give me 6 weeks, and I can build a case he won't be able to challenge. 6 weeks. I went home and stayed silent. That was the most difficult thing I have ever done. Harder than sitting with Patricia in the hospital during her final 2 weeks. Harder than clearing out her closet. Because at least then, I knew what I was mourning and why. Sitting across from my son at his kitchen table the following Sunday, eating Diane's roast chicken and watching the grandchildren do homework, all while knowing what I knew, that demanded a kind of strength I hadn't realized I possessed. I behaved normally. I asked Ryan about his job. I let Diane top up my coffee. I helped my grandson with a math question. And when Ryan casually remarked, "Dad, with winter approaching, maybe we should discuss your living arrangements again," I replied, "You know what, Ryan? Maybe you're right. Let's talk about it soon." He looked surprised, then satisfied. That was the instant I truly understood what had been unfolding, because his satisfaction was not a son's relief that his father was finally listening to reason. It was anticipation. While I continued attending Sunday dinners and pretending nothing was wrong, Beverly was busy. She secured a court order freezing any dealings involving my property. She lodged a formal complaint with the Law Society of Ontario about the lawyer who had submitted the false POA. She collected phone records, obtained properly through legal channels, that revealed numerous calls between Ryan, the buyer's agent, and the Toronto law office stretching back almost 8 months. She also assisted me in establishing a solid living trust for my property and assets, naming herself as trustee with clear directions. On my own, I installed a small camera in the workshop, one that links to my phone and saves video in the cloud. I mentioned it to Beverly. She said it was acceptable since it was my own property. What that camera recorded over the next 5 weeks showed Ryan entering my workshop twice without my knowledge. The first time he spent roughly 15 minutes searching through my filing boxes containing older papers, warranties, and similar items. The second time, he brought another man I didn't recognize. They walked around the workshop, garage, and backyard while the man snapped photos with his phone. I watched the footage while sitting in my truck in the Canadian Tire parking lot so Ryan wouldn't spot my expression if he drove past. On the day I departed for the fishing trip with Gerald, I made sure to mention to Ryan that I would be away for 11 days. I specifically noted that I was leaving my truck at home and catching a ride to the bus station, which was accurate. Gerald had picked me up because the long-term parking at the bus station was usually full, and downtown parking was difficult. I said this once during dinner at their house the Thursday before I left, in front of both Ryan and Diane. I also phoned Beverly from Chapleau and updated her on the schedule. She told me she was prepared. On the 9th day, Beverly's assistant texted me. The locks had been changed. The new buyer's agent had arranged it ahead of the official closing date, likely to begin the possession process early. Beverly had expected this move. She had already submitted the injunction the previous afternoon. I shortened the trip by 2 days. Gerald understood. He has known me for 40 years and had sensed something was off from the moment I arrived at his truck that morning, carrying a particular kind of quiet. I didn't share every detail, just enough. So, when I stood on my porch that Tuesday afternoon and the key failed to turn, I was not shocked. I was not alarmed. I was simply waiting. Ryan and Diane arrived together. They appeared anxious in the way people do when they have practiced their words, but aren't certain the other person will stick to the plan. Ryan stepped out of the car first. His hands were tucked in his jacket pockets, and he began speaking before he even reached the porch. "Dad, listen, I know this seems strange. I know it's confusing, but this is for your own good. This is what Diane and I have been concerned about for years. The house is too much. The workshop is dangerous. Ryan, I said. He stopped. Who is the buyer? A flicker crossed his face for just a second. Dad, that's not… Is it someone you know? Diane placed a hand on his arm. He glanced at her. Ryan, I said again, I want you to think very carefully before you answer. I want you to consider whether you want to have this conversation here on the porch or in front of a judge. The silence that followed felt longer than any I had ever known, longer than the 20 minutes I spent on the workshop floor, longer than the drive to the hospital the morning Patricia had her first episode, the kind of silence that holds everything about to change forever. Diane began to cry, softly, with her hand over her mouth, something I hadn't anticipated and which made it harder. Ryan spoke very quietly. Dad, we weren't going to tell you. After the closing, we were going to find you a place and take care of everything. With my money, he didn't say. With my house, my money. The home your mother and I built our life inside. He sat down on the porch steps. In that moment, he looked less like a 41-year-old man and more like the boy who used to sit on those same steps after getting in trouble at school, waiting for me to come out and talk. I had sat beside him then and worked it through. I wasn't going to do that now. Beverly has filed everything, I said. The forged POA, the unauthorized sale agreement, the proof of you entering this property without permission. The sale has been stopped legally. The buyer has been informed. There will be an investigation, and depending on what it reveals, there may be criminal charges. Diane sat down beside Ryan. She was crying steadily now. Ryan stared at the ground. I want you to go home, I said. I want you to contact a lawyer, a proper one, not whoever assisted you with this. And I want you to understand that whatever comes next is the result of a decision you made, not something done to you. They left without speaking further. I called Beverly from the porch. She answered right away. They were here, I said. How do you feel? Like I need a cup of tea and about 3 days of quiet. Get inside first. I'll send a locksmith within the hour. The investigation lasted 4 months. The false POA was linked back to the Toronto law firm, which had created similar documents for 3 other families over the previous 2 years. The lawyer involved gave up his license. The buyer, a real estate investor Ryan had met through a mutual connection, cooperated with authorities in return for immunity and gave testimony confirming that Ryan had started the plan. Ryan was charged with fraud over $5,000 and breach of trust. He accepted a plea deal. He did not serve time in prison. The Crown approved a conditional sentence including 2 years of community service, repayment, and a permanent ban from serving as a power of attorney or estate trustee in Ontario. It wasn't the result I would have chosen, but it was what the legal system delivered, and I have come to terms with it. My house remains mine. The trust Beverly established ensures it will stay that way for as long as I wish to live here. And when I am gone, it will pass to a land trust that Patricia and I had often discussed supporting, a conservation group that safeguards wetlands in northern Ontario. That had been her idea originally, something she mentioned once, and I never forgot. I finally took action on it. I no longer have a relationship with Ryan. Not at present. His children still occasionally send me drawings, slipped through the mail slot, which I suspect Diane permits, because she is a better person than the circumstances she ended up in. I keep the drawings on the workbench in the workshop. I glance at them sometimes while I'm sanding wood. There are things I wish I had handled differently over the years. I wish I had spoken more openly with Ryan about finances after Patricia died, about the house, the will, and my plans. I believe the silence created space for assumptions that grew into something uglier than necessary. I am not accepting blame for his decisions, but I recognize that grief and money combined can push people toward actions that surprise even them, and some of those actions might have been prevented earlier if we had communicated more honestly. What I want others to understand, and I say this as someone who spent a year observing it unfold and 6 weeks quietly constructing the defense that ended it, is this: your home is not a problem for others to solve. Your age is not an illness. Your wish to remain in a place filled with your memories is not stubbornness, and it is not a weight on your family. It is a right. If you are over 60 and own property, and the people around you begin discussing your living situation, ask yourself who truly benefits from those talks. Ask whether the concern is genuinely for you or for what you possess. And if anything feels off, don't hesitate. Contact a lawyer. Not your son's lawyer, not a family acquaintance, your own lawyer. Never sign anything you haven't read thoroughly. Never add anyone to your accounts without fully grasping what access that provides. And if anyone ever submits a document bearing your name that you did not sign, that is not a simple error. That is a crime. I am still in my house on Martindale Road. The furnace works fine. The stairs don't trouble me. Last week, I completed a blanket chest from a piece of white ash I had been drying in the workshop for 4 years, solid as stone. Dovetailed joints, all cut by hand. The sort of piece that outlasts the person who built it. Patricia would have approved. I know what I know now, and I am still here. That is enough. Thanks for watching.